Well, welcome back to a new episode of the Triumph Roadster restoration. In a previous episode, you saw me remove both the carburettor and the fuel tank, and today we're going to be cleaning them up on the inside and the outside, and we'll be checking that they are in a fit state to go back on the car, using, in one case, my inspection camera. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Well, here I am, now in the shed with the Solex carburettor. It's a 35 FAIE, and I assume that the 47 here means that it was made in 1947. The J would probably be a month code. So the first thing I'm going to do is disassemble the area where the fuel goes in through this banjo bolt here, and then into the float chamber, which is in here. I can already tell that the float isn't stuck because when I turn it upside down, you can hear it moving up and down inside. So I'm going to take these two out and we'll check for debris and residue from old fuel inside the carburettor. I've got this bit off. This is the valve, of course, which lets the fuel into the reservoir to allow the chamber to fill up with petrol. And this is very easy to check because you can check that the valve little needle moves in and out, which it does freely. There's a bit of wear on the shaft there, but it's not too bad. And if I blow through it and compress the needle to simulate the float coming up and shutting off the valve. So as I hope you're able to tell from that demonstration, the valve is working. So when I blew through it and pushed the pin in to simulate the float coming up, it shut off the airflow in this case, but also petrol flow, which would come through the valve when the pin is in the down position, simulating the float at the bottom of the chamber. So I'm now going to take these 5 screws out of here and look inside the float chamber itself. So I've now taken all the screws out of the cover for the float chamber. I didn't want to remove this because this is what's known in the manual as the economy device, and it's got a pair of diaphragms in there which I really didn't want to disturb because I probably wouldn't be able to put them back properly if I did disturb them. But I managed to get all the screws out, including this slightly tricky one which hides in this little groove underneath the economy device. So I should be able to now lift off the cover of the float chamber, although it's very firmly stuck on. I just ran around the edges along here with a pointy knife. So inside here, that there, oh, and possibly that one, which looks very blocked indeed, they should be the channels which go to the economy device. And this here, of course, is the float itself. We can lift that out and check its condition. So here is the float. As you can see, it's in pretty good condition, and I will polish this up with some very fine wire wool. So I have now succeeded in cleaning up the carburettor quite considerably. I've transferred 70 years of dirt from the carburettor itself to my worktop and also to my hands, which is lovely. So the lid of the float chamber and the economy device has been done, as well as the main bit of the carburettor and of course the little inlet. I've also been informed by the manual that there is a filter in here, so if I unscrew this, and here is the filter, so I'll give that a good clean as well. Anyway, so the next job on the list is to check the jets. This here is the main jet. That one is the pilot jet, I'm pretty sure. Yes, that's got a little 50 marking on it. And so I'll take out the main jet first. We can check its condition and then blow it through with a cleaning fluid. It's very grubby indeed. It's got a lot of mess on it. So good job we took it out. And I will of course be replacing all of these little fibre washers. Like that. Now I'll just try blowing back through the well and the emulsion tube and out through the hole in which the jet sits. Now I'll remove the pilot jet here and then the little jet for the economy device, which actually feeds through here. I was incorrect in saying that these were the feed for the economy device. These are just moulding holes, I assume, and they're not meant. They are meant to be blocked like that. This is where This is where the petrol comes through into the economy device, and it's got two diaphragms which move backwards and forwards depending on the throttle position of the vehicle. Luckily, the pilot jet here looks very nice and clean. In fact, it looks virtually new. So I'll give that a quick blast with the spray and then I can put it back in. I don't think I need to worry about that one being dirty. This also looks pretty clean. It's a bit dirtier than the pilot jet, but it's not too bad, and I can replace that fibre washer as well. While I'm here, I'll also take out this one, which is the starter. All it does is go from the float chamber into the main body of the carburetor through various ducts and things, so just give that one a little clean and then it'll be fine to be put back in. There you have it, one Solex 35 FAIE carburetor, cleaned both inside and out. I'm very pleased with this. I think it's in reasonable condition considering how old it is, and I think it'll be fine when we put it back on the car, although it may not be perfect, but we can deal with that in the long run rather than now. So I thought I'd just point out that this is the choke here. It's got two settings, which is unusual because normally in most carburetors they just have a different butterfly, which allows the vacuum of the engine to pull more petrol in. But this actually has a sort of setting system, which I haven't taken apart because it may be difficult to get it back together again, but that's how it works. And of course I will put pictures up of the manual so you can pause the video and read it for yourself. So all that I need to do now is put it back on the car. Well, it's now about time to fit our newly cleaned carburetor, now that we've removed all the rust from the float chamber and given it a good going over outside and in. I'm just going to put it back on exactly the same way I took it off, and hopefully it will go back on just as easily. There's the carburettor reinstalled on the engine. I've tightened up all the linkages and they seem to be alright. I'm just going to test them by sitting in the car and moving the choke and the throttle. And it seems to be closing alright as well. Choke. Also seems fine. So I think we can say that's a job well done, provided it works, of course. So here is the tank. This is the fuel sender and it's covered in dirt, so I'm going to use an old screwdriver to scrape off the dirt and I'll see if I can remove it, and maybe we'll even be able to have a look inside the tank itself. That's very interesting. It's completely stuck. The float looks alright though. See if I can free it up, I suppose. I might soak this in petrol and kerosene for a while. I think that might take some of this dirt off. So here is the tank sender. It's now nice and clean. I soaked it in kerosene for a couple of hours and then I sprayed WD-40 into the joint where the float moves up and down, and it's now nice and free. So hopefully when I put it back on the car it'll work, but I can test it to some extent using the multimeter, which I set to 2000 ohms. And if I put the positive on the chassis of it, although it doesn't really matter which way around it is because we're measuring resistance, and then on there you can see it still does have some resistance. So this would be the empty position where the float is all the way at the bottom. That's got no resistance, so that would make the gauge go all the way to the empty part. And if I raise it up we get 0.79. It doesn't really matter what resistance it is, because the gauge of course would be calibrated to it, so I'd say that should do something, even if it may not be perfect, but hopefully when I put it back in the car it should work. Certainly work better now without all that mess all over it. Well, the tank sender is now clean and I've painted the top because it was slightly rusty, so I treated that and then painted over the top in black. It looks very smart now and it moves very nice and freely. So the next thing we're going to do is of course look inside the tank. I thought rather than doing this the normal way and just having a peer around with a torch, I'm going to go all high tech, and I've got a gizmo for it. So this endoscope will hopefully allow me to see inside and ascertain the severity of the rust. So let's have a look now. Looking inside, it doesn't look too bad. I think it was painted white or something on the inside. It certainly doesn't look like bare metal, but I think there's been a quantity of petrol in the tank for a long time and that stopped it going too rusty on the bottom. Let's have a look at the top. Doesn't look too bad. That looks like a cobweb, but I think that's just a watermark, or a petrol mark rather. This here will be the baffle inside. Doesn't look bad at all actually, I've seen much worse. That doesn't look brilliant. So I don't think that's bad at all really, considering the age of the tank, and I think we'd be easily able to get away with just a bit of rust treatment and cleaning out on the inside. I have now just about finished wire brushing the petrol tank here. I've removed all of the dirt, especially around the seams and around the inlet and outlets, and I've also got rid of most of the loose rust which was on the surface. So I'm now going to put some rust converter on with the brush, and we can watch it change the colour, and then that should be fine to paint. There is the petrol tank looking resplendent in its new black paint, which is now completely dry, and I've let it for a few days to allow it to cure. So the next thing I'm going to turn my attention to is of course the inside, which is still looking a tad on the rusty side. To fix that, and firstly to remove the loose dirt which is lurking inside, I have a vacuum cleaner with a bit of hose pipe on the end, and I'm going to turn on the vacuum cleaner, put the hose pipe inside, and hopefully that will suck out all of the sort of fine dusty rust which is flying about on the inside. So I'll do that first, and then we will see exactly how I plan to dislodge any larger bits of rust and treat the rust itself. This may look to you like a lot of road gravel drying on a bit of newspaper, and that's because that's exactly what it is. I've borrowed it from the roadside. I went out to the countryside and removed it, and I will put it back afterwards. But since then I have washed it, and it's sitting here ready to go into the petrol tank when I get out the evapor rust, which I will show you now. Here are the two items I'm going to use to de-rust the inside of the tank. First, I've got the grit, which of course is now nice and clean since I've washed it, and I'm going to put some of that inside the tank and sort of rub it around a bit, shake it for a while, and hopefully remove any loose rust which is clinging on by the scruff of its rusty neck. I'll then remove the grit and hopefully the rust at the same time, possibly by vacuuming it out once again, and then I will put in the evapor rust, which is just a rust removal product which one can buy from one's local shop. I've now shaken the rocks inside for a good couple of hours, which should have hopefully loosened any flakes of rust which were inside the tank. I've also removed all of the rocks just by shaking them out, the filler neck there, and then I've hoovered out any dust which was still inside. So now it should be ready to put the evapor rust in. I've plugged the fuel line hole here with a bolt which just about fits. I haven't tightened it because I don't want to hurt the thread, and I'll find something which I can screw in over here, and then I can pour in the evapor rust. Well, I've plugged all the holes. I've made a little plastic see-through cover to go on there, and that way, because it's see-through, we'll be able to see how well the rust is being removed without having to take it off. So it's about time to put the evapor rust into the tank. I've got 5 litres here, and I think I'll put in about half that, because it says all you need is enough to cover one side of the tank at any point while it's lying flat, so then you can turn it over and do another side every few hours. Well, that's about 2.5 litres of evapor rust inside the petrol tank. You can see it sort of de-rusting it down there. Unfortunately, it did start leaking out where I had my little bolt in, but I wrapped a bit of plastic around it and that seemed to have stopped, thank goodness. If we have a look in the tank, we might be able to see if it started working yet. You can see it's this sort of lime green yellowy colour, and I will keep turning it around every few hours and hopefully that will do all the sides, and in a couple of days of turning we will have one nice rust-free tank. That's all of the evapor rust drained out of the tank and into my nice ventilated milk bottle. I've made some little vent holes in the top because it says in the instructions that if you put the evapor rust in a ventilated pot, you can continue to use it until it stops working. So that'll be something to try in a future episode, perhaps when we de-rust the MG's tank. But now I'm going to swill out the petrol tank with petrol, which will hopefully evaporate, leaving a nice clean tank inside, and then we can have a peek inside and make sure that the evapor rust has done its job and completely de-rusted the inside. I've been swilling the petrol about for a few minutes now, and hopefully the inside of the tank is looking a bit cleaner. It's certainly looking far less rusty than it was before, as you can see. I might give it a bit more of a washing out before we put it back on the car, but otherwise I think that is pretty much done. So I will put the fuel tank sender back in place, assuming it does actually work after my testing of it, but then I think it will be time for a nice cup of tea. So there you have it, one refurbished petrol tank and one very clean carburettor indeed. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, even though it's been slightly different to the usual, but normal service will be resumed next time, I assure you. Other than that, I will say thank you very much for watching, and ta-ta for now.